Well, welcome everybody. We're very happy to welcome you to our last roundtable meeting of workers' representation. And I think with this, we are concluding all workstream roundtables. So coming to an end of the discussions, but obviously more to come next year. So we will stay together and be joined by more partner organizations. And we're very, very happy today that we are having an expert lecture by Valeria Pulignano. Valeria is a professor of labor, sociology, and industrial relations at KU Leuven in Belgium. And she's a renowned international expert in the field of comparative industrial and employment relations and labor markets in Europe in general. So she's going to be talking to us today about unpaid labor in the platform economy and workers' voices, obviously in line with our workstream workers' representation. And as always, we're going to have time for Q&A to Valeria following the talk. The talk will be recorded for you to share internally with your organization. If you have any questions, please post them in the chat and we'll take them right up after Valeria's talk. So Valeria, welcome, and the floor is yours.
Thank you very much to Joanna. Thank you very much to everybody, really to Elena for really the invitation. It's really very nice to be here. Yeah, I'm really kind of looking forward to engaging discussion with all of you. I will share my presentation. First of all, I think it's this one. Yeah, can you see it? Probably. Yes, yes, yeah, great. So let me say that I know I'm going to talk about a topic which is a bit, contested in a way, a bit, interesting itself, paid labor in the platform economy. And well, what I would like to say first of all is that the data which I will present, the empirical evidence or illustration of the argument I will be speaking today about, is based on a project which has been funded by the European Research Council and on which we are currently working. So let me, oh, does it go? It doesn't go. Doesn't move. Good. Okay, so let me start. Well, as we know, the platform economy, is a quite contested field of study. And there are a lot of concerns which has been raised all around regarding particularly the working conditions of workers working within the platform economy. There are specific issues here that I would like to link into my argument, and which are again raised in these kind of concerns. First of all, the first concern is about employment status, as you know, which is in fact seen as one of the main existing loopholes that platforms normally are kind of exploiting or using, let's put it this way, and which to me reflects very much the kind of power imbalances that again, not only myself, but also many other studies have been highlighting. And in fact, what we see is that these studies, which have also been complemented by court decisions within several jurisdictions and national countries, they have emphasized, in fact, because of these, concern about employment status, they have emphasized the need to legislate to close these kind of loopholes in the employment status by providing universal workers' rights. And in particular, what is argued here is the need of streamline employment classifications to create a single status of worker, which is in fact not separate, but seen as much integrated into the employment relationship with universal workers' rights, and in fact to replace the tiered system of employment and benefits so that all workers would actually benefit of the same sort of rights. And this is very much in line with another important concern, which is the concern of algorithm and algorithm transparency. As we know, action is needed, and people have been claiming about action to reduce information asymmetries and ensures workers can negotiate with platforms on, in fact, different conditions, particularly, on having shared informations which are in fact present within platforms. And we also do know that in fact, there has been interesting progress there. In Spain, particularly, the riders law, which was in fact introduced in July, very recently, 2021, required directly platforms to inform workers' legal representatives about, in fact, a mathematical algorithm formula determining their working conditions, so their wages and working conditions. And this is, in fact, quite important. Now, we know that when we talk about algorithm and algorithm transparency, the link is also on reputation, the rating systems, which in some platforms, not everywhere, is really in place. Now, what also we do know is that, and particularly here relevant, the kind of 19 February 2021 Supreme Court decision in the UK, which confirmed, in fact, that Uber drivers are workers and not independent contractors. This is an important, in fact, steps also in terms of, again, going back into this employment status and revising it, kind of classifying workers as workers, not as self-employed, as a way, in fact, to kind of mitigate this kind of perverse effect, also related to, transparency of information on platforms, and also, enhancing workers' rights on platform. I really do think that perhaps one issue which, also has been decided and is part of this UK decision, but which, interestingly enough, has not been yet received so much attention as the previous one, is regarding working time. As you all know, particularly, the UK decision, in fact, issued an important statement about how to determine when drivers in Uber are working for Uber and thus entitled to equal wages and benefits. And here I think this is interesting to point, because it links very much into the issue of, if you like, unpaid labor in terms of working time, unpaid, which I know you have been also discussing in other seminar. So actually, in the light of this new decision, what we see is that a driver can have the possibility to, being considered working for Uber, so being remunerated, and the working time needs to be compensated by the time that is logged in and available to accept certain work. And I think this is, as I said, very important because, as I will try to show also in my data and in my presentation, working time still remains an important, if you like, source of unpaid labor within platform work. It is not the only one. There are also, as I will show, some sort of not time related forms of unpaid or source of, unpaid labor within the platform economy. And therefore, I think that it's very important today to discuss, and I'm really, very pleased to discuss with all of you about the possibility to, again, think about actions which are needed in terms of the need, in fact, of the adjustment of the employment status, which, as I will show as well, it is one of, not the only one, but one of the reason, one of the causes of this unpaid labor within a platform, particularly when we look at these forms of working related time of unpaid. Now, this is, very important. On the other hand, we do know the platforms actually kind of protect or legitimate the fact that they, in fact, consider their own workers as no workers but self-employed. So therefore, they are a bit kind of not happy to, if you like, change this kind of employment status. Because in fact, they retain the idea of the freedom that, platform work has and characterizes in terms of the way how work and workers, they work within the platform economy. So in other words, what I want to say here is that we actually are in a situation where we see, and it's also here a kind of expression used by Rodolfo van Uffel in the Libero, saying, listen, the work here that we offer to our workers is in fact linked to flexibility. We need to provide flexibility. Workers like to do that because they are flexible and they are free. So the idea of freedom is attached or is used as a way to legitimize why we don't need to change certain things, particularly employment status. Now, I would like myself to deconstruct a little bit this argument in the light, again, of what I will present later on, in the sense that I think that there is a kind of myth here of freedom. What basically, platform look at freedom, de facto, at the very end, because of different, conditions under which platform work is performed, and particularly the fact that workers do not have control and discretion capacity on the way how working conditions and wages are determined on the platform. This kind of freedom becomes a sort of empty shell. And this is what comes also out of our data. Now, I didn't have the time to, and I will not have the time to go into detail on data, so I will just present you some forms of unpaid appearing on platforms. But I can tell you very explicitly that, one of the underpinning conditions of this unpaid, apart the form that it takes, is in fact that non-capacity or the reduction of the capacity in terms of discretion capacity of workers to have control and autonomy on their own work or conditions at work, which in fact clashes completely with this idea of freedom. So that's why I want to engage, in fact, in conversation with all of you. And I think this, at least according to me, is a quite interesting aspect. So that's why we are interested in unpaid labor. I mean, at least I can say that the reason why I'm interested in unpaid labor is not because I want to put a finger on certain things which are not working well, but we want to improve it. And we want to improve it by, in fact, looking at the way how we can do it, particularly looking at what kind of work is platform work. And here we see that platform work is work. And there are, in fact, a kind of necessity from the side of workers to control their own work, to have discretion and capacity, not only freedom in terms of flexibility, but really capacity to control the conditions of their own work. And therefore, this means to, increase their own rights at work, particularly within the platform economy. Now, my argument is based on this project. I told you, well, actually, are two projects, an ERC project and an FWO project, which is funded by the Second White by the Research Foundation Flanders here in Belgium. And what we have been doing in our research with my team is to look across different platforms, forms of platform work, food delivery, care work, and many others. In different countries in Europe. We have Holland, we have France, we have Italy, we have Poland, and many others. We have been interviewing around 142 workers and freelancers, but also managers and trade unions and experts, particularly in the field of platform work. We have been doing also working diaries with workers, and this has been very important for us in trying to really figure out what kind of forms of unpaid labor are they in fact engaged in doing. We have been actually following and monitoring the activities that these workers were doing in a kind of a bench of days, normally 10 working days. Now, what are the findings coming out of the work that we have been doing? Well, first of all, we found that unpaid labor is a feature of platform work. And as I said before, employment status is one of the causes of this, but it's not the only one. Particularly, we see that this is particularly the case for food platforms or riders or couriers. Here is employment status in combination with different forms of payment, particularly fees rate system, and no guaranteed minimum working hours and shifts reduces this kind of discretion, autonomy, the freedom, let's call it freedom, in fact, of workers to have control on their own pay and conditions at work. For freelancers, the situation is different. Here we see that we don't talk about employment status. Freelancers are freelancers. They want to be freelancers. They want to compete. And that's why sometimes where they find themselves being locked in platforms because of specific reputation and rating system, which in fact doesn't allow them to construct their own portfolio as they would like to do across different platforms and also within and outside the digital labor market, they feel in fact a bit not empowered and disempowered in terms of control the conditions and the pay, particularly the prices that they can in fact establish when they establish transaction with clients. For care workers, what we see here is that it is through the care platform, engage in making these workers visible. And this is very interesting because, you know, care work has been domestic work, but many other forms of work has been always been considered informal, you know, a bit kind of not visible. But the facto platform help in visibility, in giving visibility to these workers. But again, at the same time, you know, we see that sometimes the conditions of the job market and the way how they shape this condition of the job market can in fact arm these workers unevenly and reduce discretion again for those workers who are and they want to self-regulate pay and the conditions at work. And here I can anticipate to you that particularly for care workers, the employment status is not a big issue in the sense that, you know, these workers, in fact, they have the capacity to, you know, create linkages with their own clients. They can decide upon how, you know, how to be hired, you know, decide upon the pay and the working conditions. But again, what creates problems there is this kind of clashing between, and I will jump into that, casual care work and professional care work, which actually is a bit of a challenge. So at the end of the day, what we can say here is, in fact, the fact that, you know, there is, again, this kind of algorithm mediated gig work in the way in which, in fact, access, allocation, and matching of gig work is done within platform, which in fact is the infrastructure within which unpaid labor, you know, can be created, and it is in fact created. Now, of course, we do know that, you know, algorithm is important. We don't know that, you know, information asymmetry is one of a common cause of market failure within platforms. And we do know that platforms need to reduce this market failure by introducing, in fact, algorithm mediated forms of gig work, sometimes associated, in fact, also with reputation system, ratings, and matrix, and so forth, because this is the way through which they can, in fact, reduce this market failure by standardizing consumers and workers' experiences to encourage the likelihood of repetitive interaction and to increase trust. But we have to be also very, you know, open in saying that by doing this, and so by tracking the delivery of service work, platform potentially create also an information advantage for them, but not for workers, particularly when those workers do not have, in fact, access to these, you know, information. And here, when I talk about information, I'm talking about different things. For example, information about personal profiles, information about, you know, waiting time by restaurants, information regarding, you know, clients, customers on crowd work platforms, and so forth and so forth. So this transparency of information is very important, and it has the potentiality to reduce unpaid labor, because in fact is one of the underpinning conditions of this unpaid labor, because in fact creates this kind of power imbalances I was talking about, where unpaid labor is performed, particularly waiting times, you know, kind of time related unpaid labor. And here I have also a definition of the way in which we define unpaid labor, which we link automatically to this power imbalance. But as I said before, the unpaid labor we have been discovering is not only unpaid labor related to time, but is also not time-based. And the non-time-based dimension of unpaid labor is also very important and comes through. And is in most of the cases, you know, related to the fact that sometimes, or well, actually often, people invest in doing their own work, also in having good ratings and good metrics and good statistics. But what they get out of it at the end is not big enough to support the investment that they've made at the first time. And I want to emphasize this, because if this issue carries on being perpetuated through digital mediated work, the outcome can be, in fact, precarity and precarious work in terms of insecurity, instability for workers and their own families. So we need to really pay attention to these issues. Now here I jump I want to give an illustration about the kind of, again, different areas of work we have been investigating and the countries on which, in fact, this study is, based. Now, let me go very briefly, but also hopefully not avoiding to say important things, about an illustration of what I've been telling till now, in terms of what are the kind of forms of unpaid unfolding. And we start, first of all, with the food delivery work. So we here see time-based, non-time-based, but also we see the way in which different platforms, in fact, score on these different forms of unpaid. And there, by comparing these, we can certainly say what are the conditions under which unpaid unfolds more and less. And here, if you compare, for example, food 1 and food 2 with food 3, and sometimes food 4 as well, you can certainly immediately visualize that in food 1 and food 2, the main cause of unpaid is waiting time. People wait. Now, here there is an important issue to be mentioned. It is true that people are free to let's say, access, technologically speaking, work when they want, but whether they can work effectively is not the same thing. So sometimes people really have to wait a lot of waiting time in different forms, which are reported on the slide. And we see also the reputation system combined with these kind of, if you like, waiting time, increases more and more the probability to do unpaid. So what I want to say is that in situation where we see, in fact, that people, for example, are in a particular employment status, they are paid, and here I would like perhaps to just jump into the exactly. So what we see here is, in the comparison across platform, is that unpaid work, especially in this form of waiting time, it becomes prominent, particularly in piece rate payment system, while it is mitigated in platform with hourly payment system. But also in hourly payment system, we see that guaranteed hours became an important conditions in order to mitigate unpaid. And what I was saying before is that in situation where we see that the payment is piece rate, and again is combined with reputation and matrix, then we see that the probability to do unpaid, particularly in forms of waiting time, increases enormously. What we also see is that, and here I don't know whether I can go a bit to the previous slide. Yeah, there were also some non-time-based forms of unpaid, which are mostly related to what platforms tend to consider being, no element to be accounted for productivity, but de facto they are important element of productivity for workers, and these are particularly the non-time based, like bike maintenance, paying work gear and equipment. Now also here we see, in fact, that these as an important incidence on the unpaid labor reported by our respondents. We also see the national conditions, institutional conditions can, in fact, underpin unpaid in different forms, different status, which are actually used in different countries. For example, the P2P status in Belgium, which provides some, or provided some sort of, a reduction in taxation, now to not anymore as it used to be, but also in Italy, the kind of what we call prestazione occasionale. These are, let's say, in conditions under which, in fact, piece rate system becomes much more, important, and the impact of piece rate system on the increase in unpaid labor as waiting time increases. We see also that there where, we have some charter rights in place, like in Italy, on some platform, we see that which they guarantee minimum shifts, and where there is no algorithm evaluation of workers' performance, these also mitigate unpaid. We also see that in those countries where collective agreements are in place in specific situations, we also see that this mitigates the emergence of unpaid, although we also see that these collective agreements probably need also to be a bit updated to the new situation of the work economy. Now, what I want perhaps to provide you some illustration about the crowd work now. Here, again, it is interesting to look at the comparison between the first two platforms, Freelance 1, Freelance 3, in comparison with Freelance 2 and Freelance 4. You can see here very, openly that there is a lot of unpaid labor done as a way to, in fact, invest time and effort by the side of freelancers to get good ratings. Which is not the case in Freelance 2. Now you might argue, you might ask why this is the case, because again in Freelance 2 and sometimes Freelance 4, we see that the platform is much open in this kind of idea of the portability of the CV, in terms of, it doesn't really sanction freelancers if they go out, if they, just are not active, for example, also on the platform. Freelancers can kind of really jump in, jump out, and also, not pay fees as well. There is Joanna.
Oh no, I was just going to say a couple of minutes left.
Thank you very much. Yeah. So this kind of possibility, as I say, of Freelance 2 really reduces the possibility of doing unpaid. And this is what I want to mention here. So providing really freedom and competitive capacity for freelancers by giving this portability of portfolio is very important in terms of, not generating this lock-in effect and being sanctioned if, you go outside the platform. Well, de facto you can do it, but if you do it, you're sanctioned, so you lose reputation indirectly on the platform. So you are, in fact, indirectly sanctioned. What we also see is that this idea of the pay for work, which we see also in the care platform, very important. So it's paying fees and, also increases the capacity for freelancers to, report on unpaid. We also see that there is a lot of undercutting conditions from a side of more regulatory settings, where we look at the differences across countries and within countries. We see that because platform, particularly international one, operating in global way, we see here, in fact, that sometimes this creates a lot of undercutting conditions in Indian for freelancers, because of the differences also of the way in which self-employed is regulated in different countries. So here we also emphasize the need for some policy recommendations with these regards. And I will jump here now directly on the 3 minutes, just 1 second. So what kind of policy recommendation we see here? Well, first of all, we really see that we need to clarify the employment status of platform workers, and particularly ask for reclassification when subordination is clear. As I said, this is not the case for care platform. I didn't have the time to go there because of question of time, but there I can say, and we can discuss more about that, it's not an issue of employment status. It is important to introduce minimum guaranteed pay, working time, hours, shifts is very important, and the allocation of shifts should be made transparent to workers. In this way, we should ensure workers' voice to increase discretion, in fact, as I said, on paying working conditions, making them more free in a kind of very open way. And we need to ensure transparency of information. And here I mentioned personal data, customer tasks, customer location, shift allocation again, waiting time in restaurants in compliance to the law. And we also perhaps might need to look at the responsibility to stipulate employment contracts. And this is particularly the case of care platform, which they tend, in fact, to, kind of a shifting responsibility on clients. But we see that this generates also some sort of problems. We need some adjustment of the competition law. And here I don't want to get into, because, there is a lot of legal stuff out there done by colleagues looking at this idea of the personal labor, which breaks the dichotomy between competition law and labor law. But what I want to mention is another important aspect, which is in fact this kind of collective bargaining idea. I think that perhaps we need to look, in a kind of proactive way and in a kind of more creative way in trying also to create a possibility of a renewal of institutional and material conditions of freedom of association. We need also to look at collective bargaining agreements in terms of adjusting them and putting them in line with the new challenges with which in fact the new arrangements within the platform economy creates. And I thank you very much for the listening to me. If you want, please go and search for other information on our webpage. And I would like also to draw your attention on this very recent publication. It was issued yesterday by DTUI, where in fact we report much more in details about this issue of unpaid labor in platforms. Thank you very much.